Okay, we are recording. All right. So, I would like to welcome back to the show my friend Leshel.
Woo! Hello again.
Welcome back for part two of Faith Over Failure. Now, when we left off, you were in this non productive marriage, and it
hmm
was so non productive that it pulled you back into using again.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
how did you climb out of that situation?
It was so weird. Back October 10th, 2008, that was my last day that I had used. And I had already done the whole six month women and children program previously. And then I ended up going into a 30-day program. And at that point, I thought I was good and I ended up relapsing. And that one particular day, I had used all day long and I was walking around outside for I don't know how many hours from now
Oh my.
living in New Haven. I walked all the way to East Haven, back to New Haven, from New Haven to West Haven, back to New Haven, all day long. And I got to the point
Just bugged out
where
on drugs walking around?
bugged out, looking for more. And that's the one thing about that drug.
What were
It's
you
very
doing?
powerful.
What were you trying to do? What was the point? What, were you trying
And
to
that's the thing.
overdose? Were you like,
Nope. I was just cracked out of my mind, looking
oh,
for more money. And I knew there was an issue when I got to the point of, okay, I ran out of money and I ran out of drugs. I was even contemplating, okay, let me try to talk to a guy. And luckily, I did run into this one particular guy. He sat and talked with me on the steps. And me, I've never done anything like this before. And
mm,
it's really bad when you consider, selling yourself
oh my
for
God.
drugs.
Wow.
And but I didn't know how to initiate
Right.
it. So
Right.
he talked, but then at the end of the conversation, it did take my mind off of it for a split moment. And he kind of like wished me on my way. And I was just like, okay, well, things, it did give me a short time to like recollect my mind. And then when I got up and walked away, I was thinking to myself, OMG, how do I even bring myself to this where I would even consider doing something like that?
So you had like a
And
quick moment of clarity.
yes, because I was just like, I can't believe that even crossed my mind. And where I was downtown New Haven, not
Hmm.
downtown New Haven. I was Whaley Avenue in New Haven, which that's a high drug area anyway.
Okay.
But nearby was a hospital, and I just couldn't take it anymore. And I started walking, and it was crazy. I was getting myself almost near the hospital, and my legs were so tired all of a sudden. Like I had to literally push myself to keep walking because they felt like mush at this point.
Mm.
And I walked into the emergency room and I checked myself in and I said, I need some help. I used a lot. I'm feeling a little, I feel the depression was starting to set in. And they checked me in. And I remember while I was sitting there in the bed, my aunt had called the hospital, and I talked to her on the phone.
Hmm.
And she said that I said that I think I need to go back into a program. And out of her frustration, she said, Leshel, don't be ridiculous. You need to get it together. You have those two boys that you need to take care of. You can't be going in and out of programs and then expecting, all of a sudden you're going to be fine. You just need to get it together. And
Mm.
if anybody knows my aunt, she is the type that is like no nonsense. Don't talk about anything foolish.
Okay.
And
So
I
basically, in that sentence, she was telling you, listen, you could go in and out of as many programs as you want. The problem is
mhm,
you.
yeah,
Is
I'm the
you.
one who need
You
to get
need
it
to get it
together.
together. Right. You need to
Yes.
make that decision that you want to be better. At this
Yes.
point, were your children already taken away from you?
Well, the thing is, they didn't get really taken away. I had given guardianship of my older son to my cousin, who's my son's godmother,
Okay.
and my other son, I had custody of him, but
Okay.
I still had like an open DCF case at the time.
Mm.
And so, luckily, I never had my children removed from me.
Okay.
Yeah. So I still had, my younger son, he was with me full time, but my older son, he would spend time with me on the weekends.
Okay.
So I ended up, still parenting, but still parenting throughout
Like in
the drug
between,
use.
right.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So I after I talked to my aunt that night, I said, you know what, she's right. I needed to get it together. I said, this is not who I am. This is not who I was raised to be.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like almost one of those light bulbs that went on all of a sudden. And I found myself like, okay, I got to stop. I threw everything away, any drug paraphernalia that I had
Hmm.
laying around. And I started going to church heavy because I really needed that. And even though I was still married to my husband, who was still using and involved in his addiction, I kind of separated a little bit, but still having hope for our marriage. But like three months later, we ended up calling it quits.
Yeah.
And and it was crazy afterwards. I got to the point where I was like, okay, I need to do something better than this. This is not for me.
Mm-hmm.
He was making me feel like I was crazy,
For
and like I
well,
was
for not using, you mean?
for not using, for not being there for him, almost doing that blame game again on
Mm.
me. And then, actually ended up asking for the divorce because he ended up meeting somebody else.
Wait a minute. He has
Yeah.
some nerve.
Yeah. On
So,
Valentine's Day. But,
oh my
it,
gosh, no
it
way.
was, yeah, it was devastating at that point. Even though I wasn't using, I was still devastated. I had gone through a whole, a suicidal thing. Like I tried to commit suicide, and I ended up staying in the hospital for like a week.
Mm.
But I didn't go back to using. It's just that now I had to work on my actual mental health.
You right, yeah, like you actually had to deal with issues and deal with things without the
Yeah.
aid of a drug to kind of numb you.
Yes. Yeah. And
Wow.
and it was hard because when you're dealing with drugs, they do numb you. But now I'm learning to feel, and it was kind of like a whole bunch of feelings coming at one time, and it was almost
Mm-hmm.
like I couldn't cope. And so that's where all that the suicidal thoughts came in, because I'm like, I'm no good. I felt like I was no good. Here is a man that I was being clean for, or not just for him, but for myself and my family, and he just dropped me like a bad
Mm-hmm.
habit
Yeah.
instead of dropping the alcohol. But
Right. Instead of actually dropping the habit,
yes, yeah,
he drops you. So,
yeah,
I mean, later on, of course, now you look back and see that that was a blessing in disguise because
yes. And there was
eventually
more coming.
somebody was
Hmm.
going to have to give out. Either he was going to stop or you were going to start using
Yeah.
again. So that was a blessing. So
Hmm.
take us into before right before we get into break, there's a point that something happens here that okay, you're not using, but now you're going back to look for love again.
Yes. And
And
finding the wrong person again.
and again, yeah. So can you take us a little bit into that right before we have like a couple minutes before we head into break? Can you,
Yeah.
yeah, tell us about that?
Yeah. So I met somebody new. I thought he was a nice guy because I was introduced through a mutual friend. And he was sweet, but I didn't do my research on him. And it turned out that he had been recently incarcerated for like 15 years for murder, which I had no idea
Oh,
until I got too involved with him. And I got too involved with him too fast, way too fast.
okay.
He showed me one side of him, and then
Yes, of
I got
course.
wrapped up in feelings, and then all of a sudden he
Of
was
course.
somebody else, Dr.
Right.
Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, like
Yeah.
totally. And I found myself, being afraid of him because I couldn't get out the situation. He was
Mm.
abusive. He was doing some illegal things and got me involved into it. And I felt like I was trapped.
Oh
But
my
although
goodness.
I felt trapped, there was a blessing, even though things happened that caused it to end. I do look at it as one of those blessings in disguise.
Mm. Okay, that's a great place to stop because
Mhm.
I want to hear about this blessing in a very heavy disguise.
Oh, yes.
Because I'm looking like, okay, how, like, what could possibly, what good could have come from that situation? So we're gonna stop here, take a quick
Mhm.
break. Oh my gosh, not a bake. No drugs. No drugs.
No, unless you talk about some cake and regular cake, we can eat that, but no.
We are going to take a break with an R right in there.
Yes.
And we're gonna hear a word from our sponsors. When we get back, I want to hear about this blessing in disguise.
Yes.
All right, jumping back in about this blessing in disguise. Okay, so you've met this man. He's already spent 15 years for murder.
Mm-hmm.
Where is the
Yes.
blessing in this ugly disguise?
So, dealing with him for a couple months, he turned into this wonderful, sweet guy. And then next minute, he turned into a very abusive person.
Mm,
Now, I dealt with a lot of abuse in my relationships previously, but this one was the worst of them
wow.
all because it didn't have anything to do with a substance. It just had something to do who he was. And
Mm,
I found myself getting involved into a group of people that I never associated with before in my past. People that are really from the streets that knew about weapons and drug selling
like
and
true criminals.
true criminals. And
Wow.
I,
Mm-hmm.
at the time, I was in another state, visiting because he was from another state.
Okay.
And I found myself stranded out there on an occasion. And this is when I learned of his, like, how he's an abuser. I got beat pretty badly, and at that point I was afraid of him, and so at that point I just did whatever he told me to do.
Oh
And I
man.
found
I'm so
myself,
sorry.
that's okay, but I'm better now.
Yes.
So what he was involved in some serious crimes, and I found myself caught up in one. um I ended up getting arrested with him.
Mm.
And the crazy thing is, this was my first and only time that I went with him to do a particular exchange. And he actually was being investigated, and I didn't know. And they
Oh,
ended up, at the time, the first and only time I went with him, they decided to end the investigation, and I found myself caught up.
in the
Now,
middle. Mm.
prior to that, I was in the process of relocating to another state, and he was coming with me to the new state. And I'm like, okay, now I'm about to be stuck with this man in another state with people I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up getting arrested, spending time in the women's prison for 6 weeks. That's a
Mm.
month and a half. And I no, that was not me. If anybody knows me, do I look like I
You
belong in
do not
prison?
look like, no.
No, absolutely
Oh my
not.
God. And this was
And
prison. This is not like, this
this is
wasn't
not
county
lockup.
jail. This wasn't like,
No, no, this was Niantic. If anybody knows Niantic in Connecticut,
yes. Yeah,
the women's,
that's the woman's prison out there.
yes, and I was around real criminals,
Real
and I
criminals.
and I was just like, oh my gosh, I was scared. I was there for 2 weeks, and I think I cried for 2 weeks straight because every morning I woke up looking at the cinder blocks, and I'm like, I'm still here.
Oh
I
my God.
I I felt like I was ripped of my womanhood. Like
Mm.
I just became a number and a body, and
Wow.
it was really scary. But at least I was safe. I wasn't like stuck with him. I wasn't in the new state I was trying to go to, fighting for my life because more than likely he was going to get upset, beat me up again, something.
Who knows? He may have taken your life. You have no clue.
Yes, especially he had no problem taking a life years prior.
Right. And I mean, you
Yeah.
know, a situation is bad when you see prison as being a safe place and a blessing to
Yes,
get away from
really.
somebody. So this person was really, really evil.
Very,
So
very.
now you're in there, you're scared, you know, all
Hmm.
these different thoughts are going through your mind. But what's happening? What's happening in your mindset? Because this is time now. This is time for you to think about your life and like where things are going. So, what was happening
Absolutely.
to your mind while you were in there?
Well, my first thing was I had left my kids. That was my
Mm,
main thing. I when we had gone to do whatever we were doing, I told my kids, "Oh, I'll be right back." and I didn't come back.
Oh,
And
oh,
that was my
yes.
one thing
I know that was
that like
eating you
hurt.
up as a mom.
Yes, like my kids were expecting me back and I never came back.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my main thing. And then I was thinking about what did I do to put myself in this position in the first place? And again, I was going through the whole still looking for love and wanting to accept it from anyone that showed me the attention. And I was saying to myself, you know what, I got to stop doing things like that. So when I had this time, I did a lot of praying. And let me tell you, anytime you pray, it always already puts you in a better, mindset and to open up and receive whatever the Lord is going to be speaking to you.
Yeah. Well,
And when
prayer is a connection. It's you talking
it
to
is,
God, your creator. And anytime
it
you're
is,
connected, you're receiving power. It's just like a plug being
yes,
plugged into an outlet. When it's connected,
yes.
you receive that power is getting received. So,
Yes, and it was a blessing. I when I first arrived, I ended up doing a fast up until my first court date, which was about almost 2 weeks. I literally fasted, just
purposely
drink.
or because the food was whack.
Well, no, purposely,
Okay.
purposely, and it even got a little difficult because I ended up getting a job in the kitchen where we can eat different food.
Oh, really testing
Yes,
your willpower. Yeah.
yes, but I was determined to, focus on my walk with Christ and,
Mm-hmm.
trying to stay connected.
Mm.
And even though I was actually looking at possibly 30 years because of the type of crime it was.
Are you
Um,
serious?
yes, when they showed me the list, I said, "What's all these charges? I don't even know what they are." It
Right.
was a
What is all of
total
this?
it was a total of 30 years. And I did a lot of praying because the Lord knows, and everybody knows me. This is not who I am. This is not
Right.
where I belong. And actually ended up getting released 6 weeks later.
Mm.
It was a federal charge, but um, out of a lot of people end up going to jail for these type of crimes. And I was blessed enough not to have to do time.
Wow.
I did get convicted of a felony, but at least I was home and I was like making, strives to do something different with my life.
But that is a miracle. And what I'm finding is that once people kind of stop, as I'm talking to different people, I'm
Mm-hmm.
noticing a pattern here. When people just stop and take a minute to go, okay, this is not okay. Something's got to change. And
Yeah.
they take that opportunity to reconnect.
Yes.
I'm not there's like miracles that are happening because I just talked to someone else and you'll hear her story. Her name is Kira. The episode is The Hero in Me. It was
Mm-hmm.
similar. She had a similar situation going on and she had that moment where she
Yeah.
got humble and like, okay, I've gotten myself in enough stuff. Let me try God. And
Yes.
boom, this miraculous thing took place and happened.
Yes.
So you were facing 30 years in
Yes.
federal prison and
Yeah.
was released 6 weeks later.
Yes. Yes. I was released on supervised release, and I had to actually wait for sentencing, which took about a year.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, it was still a possibility that I could get time.
Mm.
And I remember going to court, and they were saying, "Okay," and I was able to read a letter that I had wrote before my sentencing, and the judge held me to my letter and said, "You know what? I'm not going to give you time. I'm just going to give you 5 years probation." Now, probation, okay, thank you, Jesus, because
Right.
there's
I'll
no more
take some
jail time.
probation.
Yes, yes, because I mean, like, still having the possibility of having to do time, and after being out for a year and still having that over your head that there's still a chance that you
Yeah.
still may go back. I
Yeah.
was very grateful that they gave me the opportunity just to do probation, and which I ended up completing my probation actually a year early. They released me a year early because of good behavior. I did what I was supposed to do. I stayed
Okay.
out of trouble,
Yeah.
and throughout that process, I ended up meeting someone new, getting remarried. And the thing is, he was a wonderful man, but
Uh-oh.
there
Oh,
was
you
some.
said was. Oh, that means something happened. Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
he was, because we fell in love pretty quickly, and I opened up pretty quickly to
Okay.
him, and I thought he was someone else, but it turned out
Well,
he
trustworthy.
wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And
Mm.
I mean, it was sad, but it was definitely another lesson that I had to learn, not once but twice with him. But that's okay.
Right,
You
right.
you live and you keep learning.
So let me ask you a question. Do you think that those 5 years of probation kind of helped to break any habit of falling back into a pattern of bad choices, or
No, yes,
like it
definitely.
caused you to be more careful?
Yes, definitely. Especially with who I associate myself with. Even
Mm,
though my ex-husband, even though I still chose the wrong type of guy, but it was for a different reason,
right.
not like a legal issue, not abusive issue,
Yeah.
not a substance abuse issue. It was just something different.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
during this 5 years of the probation and you're out, you're released, what are some things that you began to do differently in your life that kind of was setting you up and strengthening your mindset?
Yeah, well, the one thing was, I had to try to stop looking for a replacement,
Mm,
and occupy my time with things that are more effective. After I ended up divorcing my second husband, I decided to go back to school,
okay.
because I had taken some time off for almost 13 years because I
Hmm.
became a single parent pretty early. So I had taken many years off. I ended up going back to school. That was one of my goals because I wanted to go and get my bachelor's, which I'm still working on. But
That's okay.
yes, I was able to obtain my associate's degree last year, which was,
Congratulations.
yes, thank you, which was wonderful. And
Yeah.
throughout that process, I ended up reconnecting with my ex-husband, getting remarried to him, thinking things
Which
were
ex-husband?
different. My second one.
Okay, the second. Okay, so
Yeah.
you were
Yeah.
married for the second time. It didn't work
Yes.
out. You
Right.
guys got divorced, and then
Yes.
you guys worked things out and remarried.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Which I should have slowed down because I found
Mm,
myself speeding the process up again. And that's the
mm.
thing about us, we see certain signs and we ignore them. We know
Yes.
we've been through these things before, but we
Yes. We're like,
forget,
oh, it's
hey,
different this time, or
yes,
I
yes,
could be
yeah.
wrong. Yeah.
Yes. And we got to
Hmm.
stop doing that, trying to, make excuses.
As
No, it's
women,
not.
yes, we do.
Yes, there's
We
nothing
do.
different. It's the same thing. It's
Yeah,
just a different
and
route.
we're smarter than we give ourselves credit for. I think it's because the desire overtakes the common
Yeah.
sense,
Yes.
and once
Yeah.
that happens, we don't know how to think, we don't know how to make correct decisions. But if we
Right.
just leaned into that wisdom that says, no, something's not right here with this guy, or I don't like how he's
Yeah.
talking to me right now, or I don't like
Right.
it. And if we remained more watchful instead of just trying to get to that finish line of I got a ring, or I got a man, or I got,
Yeah.
we would
Yeah.
avoid a lot of potholes.
Yes. A whole lot. A
we
whole
would
lot.
we would avoid a lot. So
Yes. Yes.
that's a
So
common problem.
yeah, definitely. Definitely. So at this point, I reconnected with my ex-husband, and during that process, I ended up finding out that I had cancer, which was like, where did that come from? I had just 3 months prior, I ended up going through a surgery, a bariatric surgery, because I had gained a lot of weight and I was trying to get healthy again.
Okay.
And 3 months into that process, I was diagnosed with stage 3 nasopharynx cancer.
Oh,
And it was mind blowing because, I went to the doctor for one thing, not having any issues, just, precautions
yeah.
and everything.
Right.
And then you find out, oh, by the way, you have cancer. And I'm just like, what do you mean? What do you mean I have cancer? I said, I was going back to school for the my bachelor's. I had gotten my associate's degree. I had enrolled in the university. It was a week before I was starting my first semester
Oh my gosh. So you're
of my
finally
junior.
getting things like back on track. Everything is
Yeah,
flowing how it needs to flow. Your past is
yeah,
behind you. You've got this
yes,
big bright future ahead of you, and
yes,
whack,
yes. And they said,
cancer.
oh, yes, you got cancer.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
yeah, it was totally crazy. And in the beginning, and sometimes I say, my husband, well, soon to be ex-husband, at the time, maybe he came in at a particular time. I needed someone there because of what was going on, but maybe not for the whole season.
Yeah.
And
Okay, I'm sorry. Is it okay to
mhm.
talk about what the problem was in the marriage?
Yeah, yeah, we can. Well,
I
I
don't
just,
want to. Well,
I,
we don't have to.
oh no, I don't mind. I just don't think he was ready to know who he was and to settle down.
Mm.
There was a lot of infidelities going on, just like it was the previous time.
So,
And
and the reason why I'm bringing it up is not just to like throw all your business out on the street.
hmm
The reason why I'm bringing it up is because I want the listeners to really understand and grasp
hmm
the heaviness of like you're getting a cancer diagnosis that already rocks your world because you hear
yeah,
cancer and immediately tagged with that you're like, oh my gosh, I'm dying, like
yeah, yeah,
immediately it's a death
yeah,
sentence. But
yeah,
as you're receiving that, you're also in the middle of a storm in your marriage of your husband being unfaithful. And that is
yeah.
another thing that rocks a lot of women's world, our worlds as women, because
Yeah,
then you start second guessing yourself like, oh my gosh, I'm not pretty enough, or I don't look good enough, or I'm not smart enough, or whatever it is. You're
yeah,
already doubting yourself there. So to
yeah.
have both of those things coming at you full force at the same time.
Yeah, yes, yes. It was really difficult. Trying to, remain focused on my health, but also focus on my marriage at the same time and wanting it to work mostly because, this is the second time around that we're doing this. And, people in the
Right.
family are kind of leery
You
about
have like
why
all
do we,
eyes on you guys, like for real,
yeah,
because this is the second time you're like, you letting him back in again, so you're
yes,
dealing with that, the
yeah, and
scrutiny
not
of
wanting,
others.
yeah, you don't want the embarrassment of a failed marriage a second time around with the
Exactly.
same person. So
Exactly.
it was really difficult. And then on top of that, I was dealing with my younger son, who has ADHD. He was just starting high school and he was having some difficulties dealing with, being new in school, um, picking out certain friends. And it
Oh.
was just a whole bunch of things happening at one time. And, there's a lot of riffraff going on in the house where we were just a lot of arguments, a lot of
Oh my
doors
gosh.
being
Well, yeah,
slammed.
like utterly just utter turmoil. There is no peace
Yes.
happening right now in like literally any area.
Yeah. And still
W
trying to smile and say, everything's going to be okay.
Yeah. And this is the point where I was following you on social media with the cancer diagnosis because I'm
Yeah.
like, here's a childhood friend of mine. I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be praying for her. Let me encourage her. And I
hmm
had no idea all of this other stuff was taking place in your
Yeah.
life because of the attitude that you took on and the approach that you took. We are unfortunately out of time for this
hmm
episode, but we're going to come back for part 3 because this is the part, this is the whole reason for the Retrain Your Brain Effect.
Yes.
Now that we know all of the gunk and the garbage and everything that was going on and where you're coming from, now we're going to start digging into the mindset change. How do you
Yes.
fight infidelity in your mind? How do you fight cancer in your mind? How do you
hmm
fight your son falling into the wrong trends and you almost see him going down the same path that you were
Yeah.
going down? It's like, how do you fight these things in your mind and still, remain joyful and positive? So when we come back with Leshel, we are going to dig into her mind and we're going to find out how she was making it through and what her thought processes were and what are some things that she you know made it like a staple to do daily to keep fighting and getting through to the other side of this storm. So Leshel,
Yes.
if you don't mind, we'd love to have you back for part 3.
Absolutely.
And thank you so much for being so open and
Thank
sharing
you.
all of this, because I know that you're connecting with someone out there that they're going through it or know someone that's going through it. So this next part coming up is really going to help shape some minds and inspire people to start changing and doing better in their lives. And that is never too late.
Absolutely. Never
it's
too late.
it's never too late, because you're sitting right here before us, and I mean, just as beautiful as a flower, and
Thank you.
all of this stuff happened to you and you don't even look like what you've been going through. So something you've done, something you were doing or you are doing is working, and so we want to know. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, everyone. So this is the end of part 2, but I encourage you to hang on for just a moment. Coming up next.